Hey, what's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It is Friday, January 29th, 2021. Hope you're having a great week. We're going to wrap this week up right now with a little government class action. We got 4 things on the to-do list. Number 1, as always, a last class review. We're going to talk about political parties, the history a little bit. Then today, we're going to talk about the political spectrum. I told you last class we'd be kind of talking about where people fall on this spectrum. And what I mean by that is, what makes you liberal? What makes you a conservative? What makes you a moderate? What makes someone a Democrat? What makes them a Republican? What makes them far left or far right? When you think of a spectrum, you kind of think of a line. You think of the rainbow, the colors of the spectrum. You got red, orange, yellow, green, blue, indigo, violet. Same thing with the political spectrum, except it's really just like 2 to 3 colors, but it kind of shows where you are on a line. And we're going to talk about that today. After that, we're going to hit you up with the weekly review quiz, which I know you are so happy about. So thrilled to have a quiz on a Friday. I'm sorry. And then after that, I'll hit you with your attendance and your assignment. So let's go ahead and start off with that 5-minute kind of last class review. We talked about political parties and the history of them. Our 2 first political parties ever, even though George Washington said don't have political parties, we still did anyway. We had 2. What were the first 2? Hey, you should know that even without studying that piece of paper. The Federalists and the Anti-Federalists. We didn't really consider them parties when we talked about them the first time because we were just talking about creating the government, but they were pretty much the first 2 political parties. That led us into basically the National Republican Party, which was known as the Whigs, and then also to the Democratic Party. If you recall, they flip-flopped because President Lincoln was a member of what party? The Republican Party, that is correct. But they were also very liberal at that time. Remember, the Democratic Party splits, and they split over a very specific issue. Who can tell me that issue? Yes, you in the front, right there. No, it had nothing to do with basketball. Basketball was not around at this time. Somebody else. Okay, yes, you in the back. Slavery, yes, slavery, that is correct. The Democratic Party splits over slavery. There were some strong Democrats who just really wanted to have slavery. A bunch of people said, nah, man, slavery's no bueno. Let's get rid of slavery. They were anti-slavery Democrats. And that's kind of where you see the 2 parties shift and change, and the Republicans kind of go more conservative. The Democrats go more liberal. You have your Republican Party with Abraham Lincoln. It changes to a more conservative party after Lincoln. Then you have the Democratic Party that doesn't really have doesn't have a lot of power up until a president with 3 initials. People always remember his initials. They don't always say his name correctly. FDR. And what does that stand for? Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Excellent. And that kind of leads us to where we are today with the Republican Party and the Democratic Party. Right now, the control of the White House is in the Democratic Party, as well as the Senate and the House of Representatives. We'll talk about that later. The Supreme Court has more judges or justices nominated by Republican presidents. So a little balance there. Not a whole lot, but a little bit. But that's kind of taking us up to where we are today. Now we have Democrats and we have Republicans. Those are 2 major parties. But we need to talk about what makes someone a Democrat, or what makes someone liberal, what makes someone a Republican, or makes them conservative. And that's what we are going to take a look at right now. So here's what I need from you guys. I need you to get a piece of paper, a blank piece of paper. Now it can be lined. If you don't have printer paper, that's fine. You're going to turn that puppy horizontal, not vertical, horizontal. And you might have to do a little coloring if you have colors. If you don't have colors, don't worry about it. But if you do have some colors, some crayons, some markers, or colored pencils, I want you to get purple, blue, and red. And then you're going to meet me back here at this board, and we're going to talk about the political spectrum and what makes somebody liberal, what makes them conservative. All right? See you in a second. All right, 5-minute review done. Hopefully you have a piece of paper that kind of looks like the board behind me. It's horizontal. I want you to go ahead. You're probably going to have to hit pause right now so that you can keep up. But I want you to draw the arrow that you see behind my big old bald head on your piece of paper, and I want you to draw it at the top of your paper. What we have here is the political spectrum. It's basically a guide to help show you what a liberal is, what a conservative is, and how it kind of weighs and meets in the middle, how many different directions you can go, so on and so forth. But I want you to draw this same thing. I'm going to explain it in a little, but I want you to draw it, if you have your colors, with this side over here, this liberal side, that's going to be blue. In the middle, I want you to have it purple, and that's going to be something we call moderate. And then over here on the right, we're going to have this be red, where it says conservative. All right? I want you to go ahead, hit pause if you need to draw this out. Now again, this is called the political spectrum. And what I want you to think of this, or how I want you to think of this, is the same way you think of a rainbow, or the color spectrum. The color spectrum will start on one side, and the more you just slightly change, the more you go one way, you'll see slight changes in color. Maybe you start with red, and then you get a little bit lighter and it's orange, then a little bit lighter and it's yellow, and then you get green out of nowhere. That makes no sense. A little bit darker and it's blue, then it's indigo, then it's violet. Same thing with the political spectrum. If you're on this end, you're going to be very, very blue, but the more you come this way, you're getting less blue. Now you're kind of purple, and you're kind of red if you get over here. And that's what a spectrum is, and we're going to explain that today. And we're going to write underneath each one of these three sections, so make sure you leave yourself some room under that as well. All right? Go ahead, hit pause, and get this puppy up on your paper, and then when you are ready, go ahead, unpause, and we'll be right here waiting for you. Great. All right, so now, with our spectrum, what I want to start with, we'll start over here on the left side, with the liberal side. Now, I put the liberal side over here on the left, and that's going to be an easy way for you to remember this as well. Please forgive me if you see me look down like this. I got my notes, and I want to make sure I get everything correct for you. But on the liberal side, you can almost think of this spectrum not so much as a ruler, but as like wings. You know how girls on Instagram like to get the wings taken? Pictures right behind them. Imagine these are my wings, all right? And I've got my left wing and my right wing. That's exactly how I want you to remember liberals and conservatives, because that's actually how they're considered. That's a name for them. People who are liberal are often referred to as left wing. That means they are on the left side of the political spectrum. They are over here. As far as you go this way, that means the more and more you go this way, the more liberal you get. As far as you can go, that's kind of when you hear people start talking about socialism. That's a different type of ideology that we'll talk about. Over on the other side of conservative, if you keep going all the way far, far, far right, well, we'll get to that in a second, actually. But for now, left wing, the left wing is the liberal wing, all right? And the colors we chose, that's not by chance. The colors are also very important too, because the left wing of the political spectrum is usually, and we'll say usually, because nothing is really written in stone here, but those are usually Democrats. The Democratic Party is usually on the left wing. If you're a Democrat, you are typically liberal. It's very tough for you to have a lot of conservative ideas and be a Democrat. Most people that are Democrats are liberal, or most liberals, I should say, are Democrats. Now, one thing we've learned in the past, the color that represents the Democratic Party, you guessed it, is blue. Liberals or Democrats are often referred to as blue bloods, or because they're so blue, they're so liberal, they bleed blue. So these three things are things you want to think about when you think about the liberal wing of the political spectrum. It's the left side. They're usually Democrats, and their color that represents them is blue. Now, what do liberals believe in? Who cares about the color, Mr. Weckbaugh? Who cares what wing or what side they're on? What is a liberal? What makes a liberal? Well, a liberal is someone who usually believes in change. More so probably than any other part of this spectrum. Liberals tend to see things and want to change things as opposed to conservatives who, yeah, you guessed it, want to conserve and stay the same. Some examples of this would be the Voting Rights Act, getting women the right to vote, getting African Americans the right to vote. These were getting rid of slavery. These were all changes in our system. In our system of government, at one point in time, African Americans could not vote. Women could not vote. We had slaves. It was all liberal ideas, people who wanted to change, that made these changes come about in our government. So liberals believe in change, and we can also say progression. To save some room here, we'll just go progress right there. Liberals tend to believe in change and progress. What can we do to change this and make it better? The world's changing, we need to change too. Now, some of these things, what are some beliefs that liberals have common? Now, and that's very important, I should say this. Just because it's up on one of these two sides doesn't mean that if you are liberal, you must believe in one of these things. This is just typically what liberals believe in and what they stand for. Similar to Democrats, all right? Now, liberals will typically, I'm going to get down here, they believe in things like protecting the environment. Meaning they don't believe that we should be drilling for oil or, destroying the earth in specific spots. We need to protect the environment. We care about climate change is something they would say. We care about climate change and believe it is real, is something you would hear a liberal person say. They would say the climate is changing, we need to protect the environment, or it's going to get too hot and continue to destroy the earth. That's something you would hear a liberal say. That's something they believe in. Another, going a little bit right here, is they are a strong advocate of gun control. Now, when I say gun control, I'm not saying they believe in guns and want guns. They want to control the guns. They want to say, hey, yo, we don't need everybody having 10 rifles, or we don't need everybody having 10 handguns. You should maybe get a gun to protect yourself, but we need to control it. We shouldn't be having all this types of murders and shootings that we have. Liberals believe in something called gun control, and that's what that is. Another would be supporting LGBTQ rights. Now, what does that mean? LGBTQ. That's an acronym that's used to represent lesbian, gay, bi, trans, and queer. And that group of people typically is represented by liberals. The liberals believe in protecting and supporting those rights of those types of people. Again, this is change. If you think back in history, gay marriage, very recently, used to be illegal all across the country. Gay people couldn't serve in the army. Just recently as in 2 days ago, transgender people couldn't serve in the army. And now they can, because a liberal Democrat president, Joe Biden, has made that an executive order reversing a past one created by a conservative. So you see, liberals believe in change and changing, kind of progressing. Another thing that a liberal might believe in is going to be supporting a woman's right to choose. Now, what does this mean? a woman's right to choose. This is a very hot topic issue that you've probably heard of in the news or heard somebody talking about, maybe in your family, maybe at school. But when we talk about this, we're talking about the topic of abortion. A liberal believes that it's the woman's right to choose whether or not she needs to have an abortion. That if she's pregnant, depending on how the pregnancy was conceived, liberals tend to believe the woman should have the right to choose what to do with her body. It's going to be much different on the conservative side, but this very important aspect, and we'll come back to this later, liberals do not believe that people should just get abortions, and they are pro-abortion. There is nobody that's pro-abortion saying, we really love abortion. To be pro something is to be for something. Liberals would argue that they support a woman's right to choose and that they know what to do with their body better than the government. Now, another one that we might see on this side is, we said LGBTQ. Right here I'm going to add to that same-sex marriage. Meaning liberals will argue in favor of a couple being able to marry that is of the same sex. Finally, liberals tend to have a strong belief in science. A lot of liberals, or a lot of scientists, are very liberal. They tend to have liberal ideas, and they say, hey, science is kind of the way we should be going. Science is based in fact and based in studies, and we can prove things. So liberals, they take that as kind of a guiding light, as opposed to conservatives, which we'll talk about in a little bit. But their kind of guiding views are all based, not all, but typically get based in science, whether it's what they believe in, what religion they choose to be or not be, what they think will happen, again, with the environment and the climate. They tend to believe things based in science. Now, I'm running out of room here. Actually, I think we got a little bit. Some famous liberals that we can put up here. Probably the one that you've heard of most recently, of course, is President Joe Biden. Joe Biden was actually the vice president for another president who was liberal, named Barack Obama. We can get one more president in here, somebody that you may have heard with just 3 letters, JFK, John Fitzgerald Kennedy, a president who was liberal. And then let's go ahead, let's get another 3-letter initial in here, MLK, who we just celebrated a week ago and had a day off from school. Martin Luther King was also a liberal. These are just some of the famous liberals throughout history, some of the more famous. President Joe Biden, just relevant for the time right now since he is our president. He is considered a liberal, but those are some of the famous people who have been liberals throughout history. Now let's go ahead and take a look at the conservative side. For the conservative side, we can pretty much do the exact opposite of the liberal side, because just as you'd expect, the left side is going to be different than the right side. And I say that, it's all weird. If I look at it, there we go, the left side different than the right side. First of all, we know the conservatives are not on the left wing. The conservative would be considered on the right wing. Now we said if you go all the way left, as far as you can go, you get into something called socialism. That's someone who's very liberal and just wants everybody to kind of have the same equality and opportunities, same paychecks, that kind of thing. Conversely, on the conservative side, if you go all the way to the right, that's where you get to an ideology called fascism. If you've heard of people talking about fascism or fascists, that would be on the far right side of the conservative side on the political spectrum. So we have right wing. The conservatives are usually, going to be the opposite of Democrats. they're usually Republicans. And to kind of clear that up, Republicans are usually always conservative, but a conservative doesn't necessarily, if you're conservative, it doesn't mean you're necessarily a Republican. And if you're liberal, it doesn't necessarily mean you're a Democrat. You could be liberal and be conservative and not have anything to do with one of those two parties. You could choose to not have a party at all, which we'll talk about in a little bit. Now, we know that this color wasn't by accident. The Republican Party and the conservative side are usually referred to as red. They're the red side. And now, an easy way to remember this, let me make sure I get both of my markers here. For conservatives or Republicans, you see a lot of the same letters here, right? Right wing, Republican, and red. That might help you out when we talk about, what side is a Republican or a conservative on. The R's, red. What side is red? Red, Republican. Republicans on the right wing. There you go. Same with the left wing. The Democrats, or we have the L in liberal, and we have the L in left wing. But one thing I didn't tell you is each one of these, the Democrats and the Republicans, they have their own mascot. I know, it's weird. It came about from a political cartoon years ago, but the Democrats' mascot is a donkey. I think they were making fun of them. They were using another term, not donkey. But you see the L in liberal, the L in left wing. You're also going to see the D in donkey and the D in Democrat. That might help you out. Conversely, our red ones has nothing to do, can't really match them up, but the Republican Party mascot is an elephant. Again, don't ask me why. Now, we talk about conservatives being on the right side. We talk about them usually being Republicans. They're represented by the color red. They don't believe in a change or believe in progress so much as they believe in conserving and more of a traditional value. So that's what I want you guys to put down. They have a belief in traditional values. What is a tradition? Tradition is something that you do over and over that's been passed on to you from family to family, from generation to generation. So it's not something that really changes. They have a traditional value system where, hey, we've done it this way. Let's continue to do it this way. Next, protecting the environment and climate change. They don't believe so much in that. They would argue, usually, that men and women have little to no impact, L-I-T-T-L-E, little impact on the environment. And that kind of leads us into another one. We'll get there in a little bit. I'm getting ahead of myself. So, protecting the environment, believing in climate change, that's a liberal ideology. Conservatives tend to think, that's a little bit of, not a hoax, but people are pushing it too much. Humans don't really have that much of an impact, is what we would say if we were conservative. Now, protecting the environment, little impact on the environment. Gun control. Liberals believe in gun control. Conservatives have a strong support of something you should know. Support of the Second Amendment. Now, we talked about this in our Constitution unit. Conservatives are strong believers that everybody should have a gun. You get a gun, you get a gun, you need a gun to protect yourself. A conservative would say, I need a gun because I'm a teacher and teachers should have guns in schools. We all need guns, is what we would say if we were conservatives. They superbly believe in supporting the Second Amendment. Now, when it comes to supporting LGBTQ rights or having same-sex marriage, as I get back into the picture, of course, a little bit opposite. They are going to have more of a traditional marriage belief. Conservatives tend to think, hey, this is what marriage is. It's between a man and a woman, not a man and a man or a woman. Marriage is between a man and a woman, and that's how it should stay. That's a traditional way of thinking. That's what conservatives believe. Next, we have supporting a woman's right to choose, and this all comes back to abortion. Another term, or the opposite term of a woman supporting a woman's right to choose, would be something we call pro-life. And to be pro something means you are for something, and they are pro the life of that child. They, for the most part, conservatives will say, hey, we do not believe in abortion at all. If you are pregnant, you should have that child. We are for the life of the child. The government should intervene if you are thinking about having an abortion, and they should get to decide whether or not that child lives or does not. So that's pro-life. You might hear of supporting a woman's right to choose as pro-choice. But again, remember, pro-choice, pro-life, those are the two opposing sides. Pro-life means for the life against abortion. Pro-choice means that the woman should get to choose, not the government. Next, we have a strong belief in science on the liberal side. Again, going to be different. On the conservative side, they have more of a religious view on life. Now, that doesn't mean that Democrats or liberals aren't religious. Not even a little bit. It doesn't mean that only conservatives or Republicans are religious. It just means that conservatives tend to let their views and their beliefs be guided more by religion than by science. This is where you'll have the topic of evolution versus God's creation. Creationism versus evolution. Typically, people who believe in evolution are liberals. People who believe in creationism are conservatives. Again, another great time to remind you, just because you believe one of these things doesn't make you a conservative or a liberal or a Democrat or a Republican. It is quite all right if you have different views. If you're sitting here going, oh, I believe that and that, that's okay. Quite a lot of people do, and we'll get to that in a second as well. Finally, some famous Republicans or some famous conservatives throughout the years. We've got, most recently, probably one of the most famous, our past president, Donald Trump. And since we were doing initials back here, three-letter initials, we had JFK. We also have somebody called LBJ, Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was a president after Kennedy. He was a conservative and a Republican. And then finally, a past president named Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was a very famous conservative president who was a Republican, who the Republican Party and conservatives really loved at their time. Also, George Bush, George W. Bush, and George W. H. Bush, those are some former presidents that were also conservative and Republican. And then finally, we have moderate. Hopefully you can tell, conservative on the left side, or liberal on the left side, conservative on the right side. In the middle, you're going to have the moderates. And what does it mean to be moderate? Well, that might be what we were talking about just a few seconds ago. Maybe you have a few of these beliefs and a few of these beliefs, and you're in the middle. Moderates tend to have some of both beliefs. They might be somebody who believes in pro-life, but also believes in gun control. That could be a moderate. Maybe they believe in supporting LGBTQ rights, but also support the Second Amendment. That would be someone, if you have enough, that's moderate. Now, you could have probably 10 of these beliefs and one of these, or 10 of these beliefs and one of these, and you would still kind of gravitate towards that side. But if you have a mixture of both, you're usually a moderate. There's not a political party for moderates. A lot of moderates tend to say, I don't want a party because I don't believe in all these things. things, and I don't believe in all these things, and they're what we call independents. That means they are independent of a political party. They might vote Republican one year, they might vote Democrat 2 years later, but they don't subscribe to a political party. They say, nope, I'm independent of that. I don't want anything to do with Democrats or Republicans. I'm my own person. I'm going to make my own beliefs. And you're tending to see more and more people grow up that way and be more moderate. And the vast majority of people have, at least in America, have different views from both sides of the political spectrum. I wouldn't be able to tell you who's more moderate or if people are more moderate or more conservative. But for the most part, not everybody is just confined to one of these sides or one of these views. This is it for your political spectrum notes. I know it's a lot. Make sure that you have a good picture and you have all of these written down. And let's go ahead and move on to our weekly review quiz. All right, guys, we've got the weekly review quiz with all 13 questions posted right now. Figure we save a little time this way. I'm going to read them to you, and then it is up to you to answer them and send them in. Number 1, what is the term we use for a person who owes allegiance to the United States and is entitled to its protection? Number 2, according to your notes, what does the term jus sanguinis mean? And look at this autocorrect. It's not just. Jus sanguinis. Number 3, according to your notes, what does the term jus soli mean? Number 4, what is the word for the way immigrants become citizens of the United States? Specific word. If you're an immigrant and you want to become a citizen of the U.S., what is the word? Number 5, 3 parts to number 5. List 3 of the 5 requirements for becoming a naturalized citizen. You don't have to list all 5, just list 3. Number 6, what are 3 responsibilities of a citizen that are required by law? Meaning if you're a citizen, you have to do this. Number 7, what are 2 responsibilities of a citizen that are not required by law? Meaning you don't have to, but it makes you a good citizen. Number 8, what type of party system do we have in the United States? Is it a single-party system, a 2-party system, or a multi-party system? Number 9, what is another word or another term for a third party? What else do we call third parties? And then number 10, list the 3 different types of third parties that we talked about in class. Of course, your 3 bonus questions. Bonus question number 1, who recently became president of the United States? Bonus question number 2, what is the name of the day when the president begins their term? It's always January 20th, but what's the name of that day? And number 13, list the 4 characteristics of a political party. Remember, we said that political parties do 4 things. List all 4 of them for this bonus point. All right. That wraps us up for this week. Not just this day, but this week in government class. Hope you did well on the quiz. Hope you got all those notes down. Your attendance and your assignment, very simple. 2 things. 1, send a picture of your spectrum notes. Whether they're colored or not, make sure that you have it in a spectrum. Make sure it's nice and lined up. I don't want, like I said, any notes where it just says, liberal and then something underneath. I want it in a spectrum, horizontally. And then the answers, of course, to your weekly review quiz. Of course, I want your answers. You got to give me those answers so I can put those in the grade book, give you some credit for your political spectrum notes. And that's it. It's Friday. Let's go ahead and have a great weekend. When we come back next week on Tuesday, we'll discuss whether you're liberal, whether you're conservative, or maybe you're in the middle. In fact, we won't even discuss it. You're just going to take a survey, and you're going to tell me what you are. It's one of those fun parts of government where you get to learn a little something about yourself that maybe you didn't know beforehand. Looking forward to that. Looking forward to seeing you guys on Tuesday. Like I said, have a great weekend. We'll see you then.